Can everybody see that? If somebody can just say yes.
Yep.
Thank you. So, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. It was a quick turnaround from invites to today. I'm Jason Stevens-Reid, and I've been brought in to the CPCA to help manage the mayoral precept funding for new services. As you can imagine, it's quite a large task and there's quite a lot to do. So the purpose of today's session is to bring you up to date with where we are in terms of routes, new routes, etc. And we're doing this before it goes live to the public tomorrow. So we just wanted to give you all a chance to see it first. I appreciate some of you will already be aware from the meetings with board in January. This is just to put a little bit more detail in there for you to make you aware, because we're going to have some quite short time scales. With me today is Mike Holmes from WSP, who will be going through the slides, and we'll be discussing going through that with you. I would ask that there's a lot to get through, so if we can refrain from any questions, there'll be a feedback form at the end of the session that will come from procurement, and that's where we'd prefer to take some comments. Although some questions, if we can leave it till we've got through everything, that'd be great. So the headline is it's the Combined Authorities precept routes, and the consultation was done between November 23 and January 24. What we're going to expect from today, as I said, the session is going to be recorded. It's an open session detailing the precept funded routes that's been approved by the Mayor and the board. We're going to be sharing details of the routes with you. WSP are here to help us with that, and Mike will be going through where we are. We're going to be able to give some understanding as to the process of how we've reached the what we're looking at to go through the precept funding, and then a brief update at the end for the August tender round. So the services we're going to discuss initially are a new busway service, Cambridge North and South City Arcs, new zipper services along Stanton Park and Ride, Wisbech to Chatteris route, a Peterborough outer loop, 3 new demand responsive services, and a few other changes that we'd like to go through. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there and ask Mike if he would like to load up, and we'll get started.
Yep, sure. I'll now attempt to do the same and share my screen.
Perfect, Mike.
That's come through. Great.
Yeah.
So I think we've just had a question. Yes, the slides will be shared after the presentation. I appreciate it's often difficult to see on a small screen the detail of some of the maps, as you'll probably see as we go through the slides. If you have got any specific questions, as Jason says, there'll be opportunity to forward those through the feedback, or if there's anything in particular that you want to ask today, we can do that at the end of the 3 presentations. So I'm a director in the mobility team at WSP, and we've been supporting the Combined Authority through the initial stages of identification of these precept routes. And then Jason's been taking those through the more detailed discussions with the Combined Authorities procurement team, which has resulted in this market engagement process. So just so that you're aware of the wider process, there were 29 separate proposals that came through that were presented through the mayoral precept process. That was a mix of new services, some service improvements or extensions, and then a number of demand responsive transport solutions, DRT. And what we've had to go through is a process of interpretation of the suggestions, looking at the proposals that have been made, how they interface with the existing network, to build up logical proposals, which have been taken through a series of stakeholder engagement discussions with authority leaders and others within the network planning team at the Combined Authority. And what you see today is the continuation of that engagement process. So the 29 separate proposals, just for ease, have been given separate reference numbers. So when you see us referring to reference 1 or reference 10, that's just simply a means of identifying something before it's got a live service number. Obviously, when they become live and when they go into the public domain, they'll get an identity, but that's not necessarily been determined at this stage. So don't get confused between service numbers and reference numbers, because it is slightly subtly different at this stage. So I'll just quickly run through. The first one is the busway express service linking Cambridge and Huntingdon, and then it's linked to what's known as reference 17, which is a link between Fenstanton and Huntingdon. So some of the original suggestions have ended up being combined into one. And then there's a separate link out to Alconbury Weald as an extension. There are various different metrics that you'll see on these plans on a page. Some of the analysis that's been carried out, including the potential catchment area and trip generation, really as a way of comparing the different comparisons when we've been engaging with the various different stakeholders. We've also proposed headway, numbers of buses, which is obviously worked through into a timetable planning exercise to give us an idea of the peak vehicle requirement. These have been drafted up, but we'll obviously go through a tender process to be able to determine the affordability of the full package when it's all brought together. So there are a series of maps, as I say. The line of route as proposed at the moment is shown on each of these maps. Where it's relevant for context, we've also shown some of the current routes so that they can be seen together. The second one is the Cambridge orbital services. Again, it shows the main points that the service are proposed to link, the coverage and the expected running times. At the moment, the North Arc and South Arc, as we've called them, exist separately. It's not a full loop around the whole of Cambridge. Clearly, as demand develops, and particularly through engagement with the university, there may well be changes to these in the future as demand builds and new areas of development come forward. But these are the initial proposals that'll be put into place to start with. So the south route, as you can see, kind of threads its way around there in pink, and the north in purple. Next one is a new zipper. There are or will be a total of 3 zippers in the Ely area. Zipper 3, as it's been called, is from Ely to Sutton or Sutton to Ely, linking some of the villages between the two places that are not currently well served. That's resulted in a slight recast to the Zipper 1 service, slight changes to make that easier to operate, with those areas being picked up by Zipper 3, the new service, and then a proposed extension of Zipper 2 going through to March via Chatteris, which picks up one of the other references. So the map here just brings all of those together, 1, 2, and 3, so that you can see the full context. Reference 7 is the Longstanton link from the Park and Ride into Sutton. That's really to provide onward connectivity from the south, interchange at Sutton for those that want to make onward journeys either up towards Chatteris or across towards some of the villages towards Ely. So you can see how the network starts to come together as one, with interchange opportunities rather than trying to run services through from everywhere to everywhere else. That's the kind of logic that sits with those. We've then in the B112 corridor to the west of Cambridge, a number of suggestions that were brought together, which has resulted in a slight recasting of the network. There's a new service operating, I suppose you could call it fast, between Soham and Cambridge via some of the main intermediate points. And then other improvements on the B1102 corridor, linking into the existing network of services, so the 12 and the 112. The 11 is likely to be kind of recast, so that you'd get two services, one Soham to Cambridge, relatively direct, and the other one from Newmarket via many of the villages down towards Addenbrooks, and obviously the 12 and the 112 in the mix there, Soham down to Newmarket as well. So again, it starts to build up a network with journey opportunities for those that might want to interchange between services. Reference 13 is a new service between Wisbech and Chatteris. There was a number of suggestions around kind of Chatteris, Christchurch, Wisbech, Downham Market, again to provide connections for those areas that are not particularly well served at the moment. And as you'll see as we go through, there are further onward connections available through the proposed demand responsive transport services that kind of fill some of the hinterland to bring people either to the main points or potentially to these services for onward connectivity. Reference 22 is a Peterborough outer loop, again similar to the Cambridge service, but this does operate in a full loop around Cambridge. Looking at options with frequencies, not particularly easy to see on the screen, I appreciate, but you probably, when you get the slides, you'll be able to pick out the full circle loop for Peterborough. It's really linking to the key destinations around Peterborough, residential areas, employment, retail centres in particular, and some of the healthcare sites. I think envisaged to operate every 30 minutes in each direction at the moment, and again, depending on the tender prices that come back. So that's the series of new services. Shall I just pause there for a second, Jason, just in case there are any questions? There's a reference note at the end. As you look through, you'll see some trip generation and catchment calculations. It just gives you a note at the end as to how they're calculated, if anybody's got particular interest in those. Just a consistent way of assessing the access to the services themselves.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate for people watching and listening, there's some big things in there that's proposed under the precept. I also appreciate there's possibly elements that link with existing that people and operators already have. It's our intention that we'll be making contact to start discussing that with you as it goes on. Obviously today is not that day. It's not an open forum for that, but we'll keep those conversations to the people that it affects going forward. So is there any quick questions around what we've just seen? Or is everybody happy? Happy, maybe not the right word, but everybody's content with. Darren?
Yeah, I just want to stress, Jason, there are a number of routes on there that most companies already operate on. So we would appreciate early discussions with those, because obviously we've got plans in place not only for service improvements ourselves this year. So I'd be really keen to understand what the impact of those changes are as well. Yeah,
no, absolutely. We are fully aware of that, and we've had discussions at quite a high level within the authority, because we understand there are going to be some potentially trying pinch points that we will work with you with to ensure resolved to the best of all of our abilities. So, but we will be starting to get in touch, and that's what the feedback form is also for, so that you can highlight. Also, feel free to drop me an email, if needs be. So, okay. Charlton?
Yeah, hi Jason. Sorry if I've missed the
Hi.
first 4 minutes, so you might have covered this. Is the intention for this to be 1+1 as all your recent tender rounds, or what time
Yes.
frame? Yeah.
Yeah, so just a little bit more background for everyone. Yes, the intention is it's going to be a 1+1, subject to precept funding being approved for the second round. We're intending on putting out the tenders by the end of the month for mobilisation around summer, early September. Some will be able to be mobilised a bit more quickly, others will take probably a little bit longer. And this is the point of the engagement, because we realise that there's resource, not just vehicles, but there's driver resource that may be required, particularly if you look at the Cambridge and the Peterborough, they're going to be quite resource intense. So this is why we're getting ahead of it now. But yes, 1+1 is the plan currently. Any other questions? No. Okay. Mike, should we drop onto the DRT? If you load that up, I'll just go through the bit that's not there. So the authority wishes to add 3 more DRT services into the mix, and we've made a conscious decision that in the past, a lot of DRTs have been tendered for by a technical supply, and then they've subcontracted all the vehicle operations. We are taking a different view, that there will be a tender going out shortly for a tech supplier to supply the back office systems, the apps, booking centre, and there'll be a separate tender for the DRTs as well. People have quickly asked about Ting, because that's one's just changed at the back end of last week. We will be rolling Ting into this process as well as with the tech supplier. So going forward, we will have a tech supplier working for the authority that vehicle operators will partner with as part of our process, and not as part of one person getting it with a subcontractor. Is that clear for everyone? Okay. Mike, if you'd like to drop in.
Yep, sure. So
Thank
hopefully
you.
you can see the next plans on the page. Yep. So this is a shorter presentation, really, to just go through the 3 proposed areas. The zones currently have been based around a manageable square mileage area for the number of vehicles that are being proposed, and access times that provides when you operate a DRT service, but also being mindful of the existing network to try and avoid duplication of the same links. And obviously the way that the DRT operates can be limited, so that you're not duplicating journeys that people can already make on scheduled services by kind of intervening in those bookings as they come through. But that's all kind of in the detail. Just really wanting to share the zones for today. So again, it's a consistent slide deck with the headers. The 3 zones. First one is East Cambridge, focused on Little Downham and Ilam. The idea is that maximum access times would be within 60 minutes. So the kind of area that you can see here shaded in pink is focused on getting people either into Ely, into Soham, or to connect to the services that operate through that area if they're wanting to make onward journeys, and that's the case for each of these. So that's the East Cambridgeshire one. We then have one serving the Fenland communities. That's really focused around either northwards towards March or southwards towards Chatteris. Obviously, you can see the background here showing the current bus network and any of the other services that we've talked about that are being proposed. We've done an assessment again of the population that still falls outside of the scheduled network coverage. So we've got a good idea in it. In some of the zones, it's still kind of 50% of the population that are not within a an accessible distance of a scheduled service. So it's really kind of serving those communities such as Turves, who are not going to be provided with a service as far as the network stands at the moment. So that's Fenland, and then the final one is South Cambridgeshire. We've got 2 zones, one north of the A428 and one to the south. This is the one to the south, kind of serving the kind of outer extent just before you go across into Bedfordshire. And then to the north, there's a slight overlap indicated at the moment with where you've got Camborne as the main kind of centre where people would get onward connectivity, and the community that's kind of developing around there, where you've got a fair concentration of facilities. So that just finalises 3 proposed zones: East Cambridgeshire, Fenland, and South Cambridgeshire. I'll pause
Thanks,
again
Mike.
there, just in case there's anything to add, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so realistically, the DRT is there to support and enhance the network and feed in, not to be a competitor to it. As we all know, DRTs aren't meant for that process. So the idea is that it can feed into the current network's onward journeys and provide more access for residents to medical, leisure, whichever facilities that they so wish to be involved with. We are going to, as I said earlier, we are going to include Ting within this round and pull that in as part of the tech operator solution as well. Anybody, any questions? Relatively straightforward. These will be 16-seated. Yes, Darren?
Is it similar timelines, Jason, starting in September?
Yes. Yeah, everything is planned for summer. So everything is planned for the summer. We appreciate that obviously some will be more complex than others. Some will be fairly straightforward, which is why we've already started the process of obtaining the tech supplier for this, for the DRTs.
Right. So can I just understand? So these tenders are coming out because I've just worked 70 days back from the 1st of September. That's kind of like end of June.
Yeah, we're planning on getting the documents out for the end of this month.
Right. So it's a quick turnaround.
It is, and this is why we wanted to do this engagement with you now, so that you've got sight of all the information, so people can realistically start planning whether it is something they're going to want to bid on moving forward, or if it's something that they're just going to sit back and think, no, that's fine, we don't want that. So it's giving you that heads up now before it goes public.
Drivers and assets, you say. Drivers and assets.
Yeah, it's a conversation that we've had intensely within the authority. We appreciate drivers and vehicles on some of these areas are going to be quite difficult. Other areas, other items which could be just a small extension, a couple of tweaks, another PVR might be more easier to manage. However, as we know, Cambridge and Peterborough, arcs and loops, quite intense resource. And that may take a little longer, but we're giving people the opportunity now to start putting their plans in place before the tenders come out and working out. We felt it was the right thing to do because it's a lot to take in. And if you take into account as well, Andy Hunt has also got tenders coming out for existing work. We're looking at upwards of 50 plus tenders over the next few months, which is quite significant for anybody to handle.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Yeah. Peter?
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, firstly, thank you, as you say, for the heads up, because I am in complete agreement. It's really valuable to have the information of what you are looking to procure. I suppose my only feedback would be, given that this is by and large new provision, which isn't currently there, is there not any scope to put a little bit more time into it? Because I'm conscious, you guys want us to get this right so that this policy works for the politicians. It would be a disaster if we don't have enough time to mobilize all these services properly, and what actually goes out is not of the high standard that we want to deliver and you guys expect. So given that there are not people currently relying on these services who are going to have no bus come 1st of September, if you delayed the contract start date by 4 weeks, for example, the more time we have to mobilise, the better job we can do for you. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, I think the reality there is if we can realistically justify and not go too far past where we want to mobilise, then yes, we can probably work with that. There's a lot of smaller things coming as well that would be easy enough to mobilise quite quickly. So we would work with the successful bidder to ensure we get a good mobilisation in the quickest time that's acceptable and that we can manage.
That is helpful and that is appreciated, and that is something which we haven't seen and are not seeing at the moment in the current tender round, where we are being expected to mobilise stuff over sort of 2 to 3 weeks and we haven't got contracts signed yet. So if we're going to have if your words there are going to be met with actions, then fantastic, and that will be a very welcome change.
Nothing in life is guaranteed, but this is the mayoral precept, so there's a lot on it. So we want it to go right as well. So it has to be done in a way that's sustainable and that we can deliver properly, because there's no point in delivering a service and it falls over within the first week.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will work with the successful bidders to make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Charlton?
Yeah, I get why this is the case, Jason, but it's more probably something to note. For 1+1 contracts, given the amount of additional resource that's going to be required from the network, that's quite a short-term contract for the additional capital and investment that's going to have to be undertaken by operators as a collective. So it's just something to note that that's a big ask for such a short-term outlook initially. I know why it's tied. Obviously, it's tied to the precepts. I understand the reasons why. It's just maybe something to note that you're asking for a lot of capital investment into the network by operators for quite a short contract length tied to that.
Yeah, that is another discussion we've had. Unfortunately, the precept funding does need to be approved at board. So the success in year one is what determines potentially year two. But it's expected that we will get through 2 years. But yeah, we can have all that on the feedback form. So anything else around the DRT? Okay, Mike, shall we move on to last slide?
Should have come through now. So this is just to talk through. There are some of the proposals that had an impact on existing tendered contracted services, or some that largely contracted services. So we just wanted to run through those to complete the picture. Again, this is the third of the 3 slide decks that you'll receive, so standard format. First one is Service 68 for Wisbech, which the desire here is essentially to have a relatively minor diversion down to the Morrison's B&Q site, just to the south of Wisbech here. So it's the service that currently loops round, essentially making a diversion part way through. Service 66, Huntingdon.
Sorry,
yep.
Sorry, Mike. I'll just give a quick bit of background. So this element that we're looking at now, suggestions, feedback, and consultations from local councils, precepts, engagement sessions. So most of these are existing services that where requests for change have been made. So we will be engaging going forwards. Again, it's give you a heads up as to what people in the authority and in the region have been asking for. Thanks, Mike. Sorry.
Excellent. No worries. Second of the 4 is Service 66. That's to improve the frequency between Huntingdon and St Neots. So there are a few options there. It's currently hourly, going up to 30 minutes is the obvious choice. Standardising the operation potentially where you've got short runners. Just gives the route for each one of those. Not all of the routes are changing. Some of them are just frequency uplifts. The 302 and the 305, Ramsey, Huntingdon, St Ives, March via Warboys. The 302 is unchanged, but the proposal is to increase the frequency and slightly realign the route of the 305, particularly around Ramsey, so that it provides better access to some of the outer areas and kind of onward connectivity through to Chatteris, down into Huntingdon, potentially interchanging with the 302 at Warboys, so that again further journey opportunities are provided for these communities. Next is the X2, X3 between Huntingdon and Cambridge. Again, that's looking at frequency uplifts, essentially, depending on availability of resource and the kind of pattern of timetable operation. Currently hourly, could go up to 45 minutes or beyond, depending on kind of views on running times and capability there. Again, just illustrates the route through there. So they're the fairly quick run through on those. So we've got X2, X3, the 302, 305, 66, and the 68.
Thanks, Mike. Just to clarify, obviously at the start we talked about 29 routes, and those quick with a calculator amongst you will have realised that that's not full 29 routes.
Yeah.
There are other elements that we're going to be talking individually to, which are very minor amends, slight timetable changes and odd diversions on routes that we'll be talking to incumbent operators with initially. One thing that I need to make you aware of, with some of the existing routes where some of the changes are quite significant, we are tied to a no more than 50% increase in price that we can do as a standard variation. If it looks like it's going to be potentially more than that, then we have to look at retendering it. We have no option because legally we can't spend any more than 50% of the current daily price on any particular route without it having to go back out. So I need to make you all aware of that. That's unfortunately where we are with some of these routes. So we will be getting in touch and discussing with individuals over the next few days. I'll be making contact and making appointments with you all. Any questions, comments? No. Mike?
I'll just make one point. I think it just reflects some of the comments that have been made. I think it's massively positive that we're seeing so much investment in the bus network, and I think it is challenging, and we're seeing this just from a consultancy perspective. We're seeing this in a number of areas, and I'm sure your operator colleagues are also reflecting on this in some of the other transport authority areas where there's either been BSIP funding or other forms of funding that have been relatively short term. It does create a challenge, but as Jason says, obviously the combined authority are keen to invest in the bus network. They're keen to see these improvements made. The fact that they're bringing in additional resource, such as myself and Jason, kind of proves that they are dedicated to making this work. I think they're still running the day job at the same time, obviously. So this is intended to work with you and try and receive as as positive outcome as we can, and hopefully you see it in that regard. Darren.
Yeah, thanks guys. Yeah, and look, I support. I think it's great, this sort of stuff. Yeah, really up for it. Want to support you. Look, I've not been quick enough to add how many buses we need, or how many drivers. Have you got? Could you give us some headline? We think this is worth so many buses. How many drivers do you think you need? Just so you know, we've got an idea of the scale that we're talking here.
Yeah, in the slides, there's indications of PVR.
I mean, it's a total thing from a combined authority. Have you added them all together and think, look, we're going to need 300 buses here. We're going to need about 1,000 drivers, for example. Have you got a rough idea of the scale of the challenge? That kind of.
Yeah. I could probably give you a rough answer, Darren, if you give me a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It just saves me. I'm going to get the slide deck so I can do it myself.
Yeah.
And have we got timetables for all this sort of stuff as well? So our commercial teams have got everything that they need to hit the tight turnaround. You know what I mean?
We have got some timetables for some of the routes, particularly the new stuff. We will, of course, be working with yourselves as well in terms of what's potentially possible and what isn't possible. So it's still an emerging beast to a certain extent, but probably 95% of all the detail is there. It's just the final tweaks.
And I guess kind of like the longevity on this sort of stuff, because, you know, with any tenders, what you want to try and do is try and get them to the place where they become commercial, don't you? That's the ultimate goal. So is there a 1+1 contract for really trying to get people to use these services as well? So, you know, driving up publicity and engagement and all that sort of thing. It's the full package type thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a full package. The authorities comms team will be working with successful bidders in terms of promotion and advertising. So there's a full back office within the CPCA to support all of these routes with any successful bidder.
And what about infrastructure spend as well? Bus stops, bus shelters, bus flags, cases, and all that stuff. Is that all?
There's conversations have been had. We appreciate that there's going to be infrastructure needed in some areas and potentially improvements to others. So that's in the plan.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, mate.
Okay.
Yeah, so Darren, just as a rough estimate, you're probably looking at a PVR of 20 additional vehicles. So depending, obviously the tender process will define how much of the aspiration is affordable, clearly, because there are options in terms of days of operation and span of the day. But if you said, you know, for a service within a week, each PVR is 3 drivers potentially, it could be 20 buses, 60 drivers, additional across the network changes that they're looking at the moment. That's kind of ballpark. It's that sort of size, I guess.
Yeah, that's okay. And again, it's a 1+1 contract.
Yeah. This time everything is a 1+1. You know, that'd be down to the authority to look at that in the future. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, clearly, it's a mix of vehicle types as well. As Jason said, it's not all the same vehicle. So that may help in terms of sourcing assets.
And
I mean,
sorry, there's no specific things like there's got to be Euro 6, EV. You know, are you putting any considerations to that sort of stuff?
We are putting some consideration into that. We're looking at changing some elements in terms of new contracts, because obviously with any new contract, we want it to be the best that it can be.
Yeah.
So we're looking at Euro 5 upwards.
Right. Okay.
So, but we're going to get people who've got the opportunity to get ready for that. In terms of the DRT, we want 16 feet, low floor front access. Obviously, we're not looking for a tail lift vehicle because they just don't meet the requirements really, and they just don't fit the image and the investment that the authority is trying to project.
Yeah.
So we're looking at that kind of stuff. Brand new would be preferable, but we appreciate short timescales. Might have to be something that's refurbed but still looks really good and a few years old. You know, we're conscious that existing contracts elsewhere may release some assets for some people, and for others could be a different ball game. So yeah, there's going to be some changes in terms of what's expected in terms of standards of vehicles potentially on the new routes. We will be looking for engagement, and it's also not to say, and we'll put this out there, we are tied by what we've been told to and agreed to in terms of the precept. However, some routes may require a different option, but you will have to bid on a compliant bid first. So there may be the opportunity to put in a second alternative, but it still must meet the requirements of what it is that the CPCA is looking for in terms of what's being put out there in the precept, in terms of the plans on a page. So perhaps a small deviation, but nothing huge. But we appreciate as well that that's time consuming. So if we can stick to close to where we want to be, then that's probably the best place. And we'll monitor and assess as we go along, because they're new. You know, it's not set in stone. Everything's going to be perfect. So just bear that in mind. We will be monitoring. We will be working closely with successful bidders to ensure that it's working as it should. Darren?
I just thought, have you a view on the agency drivers?
Not actually giving it any thought at this point. I think that's something I probably need to discuss higher up. I would say if they're employed by you, they're your drivers, and as long as you look after them the way that you look after, you know, every other driver, and they're doing the job.
Look,
it's difficult. I appreciate that.
Agency drivers, you know, because you know they generate their own problems. I just wondered how you're taking a stance on it in terms of you do not want to see agency drivers. You want them fully employed by the OpCos. I'm just trying to get an idea of, you know.
I think I'll need to come back to you on that one, Darren.
Okay, all right, no problem, Jim. Thanks, mate.
But I know what you mean. I had probably 50% of my staff in Bristol were agency. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. What I'm going to do now, thanks for that. We're getting on a lot quicker than we thought, so that's good. I'm going to hand over quickly to Andy Hunt for 5 or 10 minutes, just to quickly go through the August tender round that he's got. It seemed the perfect opportunity while we've got you all together, just to discuss that. So, Andy, if you'd like to have a 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, morning all. Pretty brief, really. There is some contracts coming to the end of their term mid-August, and so the combined authority will be re-tendering those contracts. There's 28 routes in total. The tender should go live very soon, and we're looking then for a mid-August start. And that in a nutshell is that.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And this is what I was trying to get across, guys, that there's been a lot going on over the next few months that, you know, we need to be aware of and you need to be prepared for. So just to keep that there. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I'm just going to hand over to Chantel from procurement just to tell you about the feedback form and how it can be completed. Chantel?
Hi. So I appreciate this is a lot of information that you guys have to absorb and digest. So it would be really helpful, and we'd welcome as many operators as possible to complete that feedback form, which we'll be sharing after this call via the portal. Although most of the questions within that feedback form are targeted questions, we would appreciate any other feedback you have or concerns that you have, like in terms of our processes, the way we procure, what we could potentially do better, and just how we share this information with you guys. It'll also be handy to know if you would think that holding these market engagements more frequently would be useful for bus operators, just to get the heads up on what's coming out, because I understand with the mayoral precept there's a lot of routes that are coming out now in a short space of time. So if you could please complete it and get it back to us. I think the deadline for submissions will be next week, Tuesday, at the close of play. So I'll get that out as soon as this call's finished.
Thanks, Chantel. Any final comments while we're here, or shall we call it quits there? Okay, thanks very much, everybody. We'll be making contact with operators again. As I say, feel free to, you can drop an email if you need to. And quickly, yeah. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for your time and your engagement.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks
now.
all.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.